So, Internet, since about January, I've been actually working on a book, right? A book about what it's really like to do YouTube and have this as a job and the journey that I go through in it. I kind of take a personal look at the world I'm in, and I also, kind of deal with and look at what's in this world, similar to what I've done with other online communities, but on a much deeper, more in-depth scale. I talk about the people, the issues, and all that and in between, but today we're talking about a specific issue using a lot of the research and information I've lifted from the book. So yes, that's what we're going to discuss today. Today we're going to end up discussing fan and YouTuber interactions, and there's a very specific reason for this. So it's important the rules of interaction are clear for YouTubers because often than not, there are YouTubers who overstep their boundaries and abuse their privilege, right? And then on the other hand, there are fans that overstep their boundaries and end up showing up at their favorite creator's home where they definitely should not be showing up. So as the title states, we're going to be discussing that, right? And we're going to be using information and actual stories that I have collected over my time of doing this job from my book. Now, most of these events are things that happened to me, but I do have other people who have given their 2 cents about all of these interactions. So I ended up really being prompted to do this video after, I saw a fan fiction that for the first time out of all the weird fan fiction and smut that I've read about myself, I was actually offended by it. And guys, just so you know, I don't read the fan fiction to fuel my ego. In fact, if and when the book does come out, you will find that, in fact, it makes me feel really awful about myself. But just as a word of advice, guys, I do see it. I do. If you don't think I see it, you're wrong. I see it. I see all of it. So what is so ridiculous about this story that I am covered in? Well, first of all, I'm some weird cheating weirdo making out with one of my friends. It portrayed my friends in a light that was equally just as bad, and much of the fan fiction does do this, so this isn't just that one person. There are plenty of other stories like this, right? And then in the story, at one point, my girlfriend let our house burn down with me in it. The story, probably wouldn't have prompted a response had it not put the most gracious author's note that I shit you not said, "No disrespect." Ooh. Ah, shit. Now you said that. That's an absolution of all your sins. You've been freed from the shackles of your oppression. Oh my god, a free spirit you are. I do see a lot of this stuff, and actually, the friend of the OP had actually said, "Hey, you shouldn't do that. That's not good." And I've eventually tried to work out what my emotions should be with fan fiction and how people interact with creators in that fashion, right? And, my opinion kind of goes back and forth a lot. But allow me to explain my feelings and why I am so incredibly just stupefied, right? I don't want to encourage people to do more ridiculous smut that's just not representative of who I am, but it's bothered me so much that I actually do really want to do a video to get it off my chest. I think I should mention that I deal with gay ships much like Jacksepticeye and Markiplier deal with the ship of themselves. They just kind of take we don't really just keep it tasteful, right? That's what they say, either keep it tasteful or don't do it at all. I'm confident in my sexuality. I'm a straight guy. I am. But if people want to have that fantasy, fine. But, there are just personal lines that you cross when you write things like that are kind of freaky. So, much like with what Jacksepticeye says, either keep it tasteful or just, don't do it, right? And Jacksepticeye also talks about how people thought because he said, I'm not really comfortable with this, that meant his relationship with Markiplier or his friends was being jeopardized because of people's writing, and then people started, insulting the other person's writings. That's not the case of what's happening here. I've never seen that be the case. It really isn't representative of how creators interact behind the scenes. But it doesn't mean I don't have weird fan interactions that have brought me to this point and the emotions that I feel now, right? So this is an actual excerpt from my book of a story about a fan who had found my girlfriend's Twitter before we were public. We previously rejected the idea of being public with our relationship after a fan found her Twitter and harassed her for my contact information. She, being a New York native, gave them a bit of NYC's famous hospitality in retort. I'm glad she did because I hadn't the foggiest idea what to do. It was my first time dealing with someone like this. Who the fuck goes on someone else's partner and then ask for their partner's DMs so they can slide into them? I should mention people like this represent the absolute minority of crazy fan interactions. There are tons of examples out there of famous people being harassed by just absolutely insane people, right? One of the stories I bring up as an example is the fan who went to Social Repose's house. Now, you guys know I had choice words over Social Repose, but I do have to agree with him that people getting mad at him because he made a joke and then someone actually took that joke seriously are stupid. Long and short of it is, a fan showed up at Social Repose's house because he said, hey, whoever shows up to my house, I'll give you a glass of milk. It was very clearly a joke. Someone took it seriously. There are also much more serious examples of this, such as the fan of Bjork who sent a bomb to her house. That's horrifying, obviously. Don't ever want that to happen in my life. There's also other things, there's the example of the guy who shot John Lennon being an extreme John Lennon fan. There is Christina Grimmie, who was shot by someone who was a super mega fan, who was also an absolute nutcase. These are all things that I bring up in the book, and they're absolutely the minority, obviously. But it doesn't mean that these people aren't out there. And when I see people going to my partner and saying, hey, can I have your partner's DMs? Can you send that to me? But it's the absolute minority, right? I have plenty of positive interactions as well. For example, I just went to PAX recently, and a fan gave my girlfriend and I, a drawing of us, which was really super cool. In fact, I know it's kind of blurry, but it is up there on my bookshelf, so thank you. But that's why it's frustrating when there are fans who do overstep the boundaries, because it makes me less inclined to show up places. And it also makes me less inclined to be a personable human being. Look, it makes me less personable with fans because there are those fans who write stories or draw pictures of me fucking my friend in my ass. And let me tell you right now, these stories are not representative of how one person goes from being a friend to then sticking their penis in their asshole. It's just not realistic. But that's just me being a bit of a writer and critiquing a bunch of teenagers. I assume most of the people writing or saying these weird things online are young people, but a part of me wants to say temper your expectations, because this is not how people really react in romantic situations or in real life at all. But I understand it's fantasy fulfillment, and that's fine. The point of it being tasteful is that you're not making needless accusations and then saying, hey, I like what happened in this story, so now can you do it in real life? Like, I have read crazy things where fans have their self-insert be carried up by me up the stairs bridal style, exact quotes from an actual story I've read, and we live happily ever after. That's a little weird, but let me phrase it like this, right? Imagine you walked up to two strangers and tried to break them up because, you saw this totally cute guy with a man bun up the street who would just be perfect for that petite little blonde. Well, her boyfriend would not hesitate to punch you in the face for, suggesting such a stupid, ridiculous thing. The same goes for my situation, but except it's online and I don't have the satisfaction of assaulting somebody for somebody saying something stupid. I do hope I'm not preaching to the choir here, right? Because this unnatural stan culture behavior, I'd argue, is very toxic. We're getting a little bit more information about how this interacts with people online in between each other, not even creator to creator, just regular users to user, and it's, stan culture is incredibly toxic. It seemed to be more often than not, right? It's very homogenous, right? And people should be critical of that. You shouldn't be so willing to stan someone, first of all, because there's a lot of things that normal people have done that are bad, which would quantify you not standing them. But in my world, a stan wouldn't exist. And also, being a stan is a bad thing. It's from Eminem's Stan. There seems to be an issue where stans replace the idea of these real people. For example, in the Stan song where, Eminem is busy, he can't respond to the fan, but the fan keeps asking for a response and getting more and more angry about it. Eminem can't respond because he's busy. He has a life to deal with. You know, because you replace Eminem the person with Eminem the idol, you end up doing stuff that you wouldn't normally do out of rationale. I, for example, have seen people do crazy things in honor of Ariana Grande, right? And just because you're a stan of Ariana Grande does not mean you have free license to use the N-word in a derogatory manner, which is something I have actually seen. And to the people who do that, you're an idiot. Go play in traffic. Like, I don't give a shit if you don't like Kanye West, but you gotta be able to relate to the man when there are paparazzi that show up at his house at 3 a.m. just to fucking harass him.
Hey, good morning, Kanye.
Shut the fuck up.
Hey, Kanye, are you mad at Jim Kimmel? Do you have anything to say about Jim Kimmel, Kanye? Do you think he was too much with you? Hey, are you mad at Jim? No. Are you mad at Jim Kimmel, Kanye? How's it going, Kanye?
Don't say anything to me, man. Like, stop asking me questions. You out in front of my house at 4 a.m. Talking about how's it going? It's not going good. Y'all here trying to take money out to make money off us. That's how it's going. It's 4 a.m. It's 4 a.m. and you ask me how it's going. You know I don't want you to say nothing to me. You hear what I'm saying? Respect that.
Relax.
Nah.
Come on,
What you
Kanye.
mean relax?
Relax, I did nothing to you.
What you
man.
mean?
I'm just.
What you mean relax?
Hey,
We're
gonna
in the
hit
street, man.
You gonna hit
We
me?
don't
I
need
don't
to
did
fight,
nothing to you, man.
We don't want to fight. We're in the street.
Come on,
I'm
Kanye.
gonna change all this.
Come on, Kanye. You know we like you.
Shut the fuck
You
up.
left the-
It's 4 a.m. You blood-sucking mosquito.
You left the bag right there, Kanye.
You want me to be standing out in front of your house at 4 a.m.?
That clip that you just watched, people actually said Kanye was being unreasonable. It's like 3 a.m. and this guy's like standing in Kanye's garage. Look, you know, if I ever were to get to that point of being quote unquote successful, I really don't know how I deal with that, you know? Because in my opinion, he was nice as shit. I realize that's a paparazzi, but like, as I said, there are crazy fans who do stuff like that. And I bring up, you know, the example of John Lennon. I think stan culture and how we idolize celebrities, and I'm not calling myself a celebrity here, but just in general, I think how we acknowledge that and don't acknowledge the human element is part of the larger issue of division on the internet. And I think politics is the best place to show this, right, for an example, but I do think it could be argued in social circles because just the ecology of how communities work online, they're just very insular, right? But since the internet boom, right, politically active people have consistently moved away from people that they disagree with. People are moving away from the center. And I'm not just, you know, pulling this out of thin air. This comes from the Pew Research Center, and so far, what they're saying is coming to pass. And I'd argue where that political divide comes and it spreads and it gets much larger and people in the center become fewer and fewer, you also see that with internet communities. You don't see outside of the community, and in that community you have sets of rules and ideals and beliefs that you hold to be good and fine. And that happens for any group you're a part of, period, but it seems to happen very quickly on the internet just by the nature of how you can put yourself into groups and just cut yourself off from the outside world. I talked with multiple YouTubers about this, but mostly they agreed that, hey, shipping real people is wrong, but in those communities, you could say, hey, I like to ship real people, it's okay. And that's just a difference of opinion, but I also asked, how do you deal with people like this? You know, what should I do so that way I don't let people like this, you know, get in the way of my work or make me feel uncomfortable about myself or about how I live my life. For example, one person I interviewed told me to just ignore these people, they would grow out of it. Basically, they said that in the future, the people writing these stories now will look back on it and cringe at the fact that they did this and they will not do it again, right? I've seen exceptions to the rule where I've seen people in their 20s that are fans of me or my friends or anybody, and they most certainly do not grow out of it. It definitely depends to be person to person. On average, I would say you grow out of it, but there are special exceptions. Another one said something really interesting, and it's from an interview I did with this creator. I'm not going to say who it is now. You'll find out who it is in the book. Fans will always overstep boundaries, no matter who you are, no matter what kind of community you strive to build. There will always be at least one person that will overstep their boundaries with you. In my case, it happened several times, unfortunately. But as it happens more and more, you begin to realize that you're essentially an entertainment puppet to a lot of people. And to those people, you're no longer a simple human being like them. And all this leads to is a sense of entitlement, where they feel it's okay to research and invade your private life. How do you even deal with such a situation? You really can't. No matter how much you try to hide yourself from public eye, someone will always find a way. You can always encourage your community not to do such things. That will aid in reducing people committing such invasions of privacy and boundaries. However, you won't ever be able to stop it. If hearing something like that, and as kind of just sad and negative as that feeling, doesn't make you feel the slightest bit of empathy, right? You're probably someone who does already invade those creators' privacy. Ultimately, really, the conversation I'm trying to stir here, right outside of how fans will interact with YouTubers and vice versa, and I do talk about how YouTubers kind of overstep their boundaries. That's not really what I'm talking about today, but it is something that I do bring up. But what I'm ultimately trying to discuss here is this kind of emotional toll this job brings to people who are in it, right? And all jobs come with their own emotional toll. It's different for each job. And I know YouTube is filled with blowhards and egomaniacs. It's definitely filled with people like that. But there are a large majority of just normal fucking people. Most of my interactions are positive, right? I wake up, I get hundreds of comments that all say really nice things. But it's definitely a law of diminishing returns, where you get so many compliments, the compliments end up not being as well valued as the ones that are negative. This isn't to say I have, thin skin or anything, but it's just that I'm trying to encourage more of an academic conversation with YouTube in this case. I'm certain we'll have more academic discussion in this medium in the future. I'm starting to see that now, even on my college campus, but it'll be a long time before we have discussions like this very openly and plainly. I think right now creators don't want to talk about this because they're afraid it's going to alienate someone. And yeah, sitting here right now doing this video, I'm worried somebody else will be offended that I had an opinion. I think it's really important to recognize that human element online, right? Even though, not just for me, but just for online discourse in general. It's something that I'm trying to be more aware of, and just, if I cover a person in the video, unless they really have it coming, it's more like poking fun at, and I don't want people to show up at somebody else's comments and then, bathe in the blood of their enemies in the comment section, insulting them on my behalf. I'm not gonna repair online discourse. I think it'll get worse, really, honestly, and that's coming looking at the stats. I think it gets worse as people flock to these communities, and it's going to continue to happen. I think those communities are interesting. There's a lot to learn from them, but people need to acknowledge, even if the YouTuber doesn't respond to your comment on like a fanfic or fan art or something, there was still a interaction that was had there. Things that you do online do end up having an impact on a person on the other side of the screen. I think it's something that we tend not to recognize. I tend to be of the notion that, yeah, you can turn your computer off, like, you don't have to deal with the shit online, but coming with how interconnected our society is, I don't think it's a really logical progression to say, just leave. I think it's pretty easy to tell that I'm a total cynic with this. I don't know how I cannot be. It really is just my feelings that were kind of built up over time with the interactions I've had. And I know, and I've talked to people who feel differently than me. I definitely have. This is just how I feel. I really can't back it up outside of anecdotal opinions from other people. So, with that being said, thank you for listening to this very long argument I made about fan fiction and stands online. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts and bad opinions, you can do so by following me on Twitter at FPSDiesel, on Instagram at FPSDiesel, and keeping up with me here on the channel by subscribing and hitting the bell, because YouTube doesn't know what a subscription means.